dance out in the cold dark night. Screams echo loud, no wrong, no right. Rescue calls flash blood red sky. Spirits linger, waiting not to die. Ghosts on the line, they whisper and wail. Fingers reaching out, pale as they fail.
Jeep right now, babe.
I have the AC on.
Hey, everybody. This is Colleen with Emergency Encounters. I'm here with two of my best friends, Mad Max and Mud Lover.
Hey.
And Mud Lover's out in her vehicle because her computer's having issues. So she's sitting out there with her AC on. It's not
And I'm
good.
wearing this hat. I'm wearing this hat because it's summer, even though it rains and hails. I don't understand that.
That's the Rocky Mountains, man. Yeah, that's the Rockies. Every July, I think, so we just had, we're recording this July 6th, and July 4th, we had really intensive thunderstorms that came over, and hail and rain and everything else, and coming back, because we all went for a walk, and coming back, holy crap, the storm. I was going 35 down Bannock Highway, and I could barely see the car in front of me.
Yeah.
It was hailing so bad. We were in Walmart and it was hailing and thundering so bad you could hear it.
The
in the
vibration.
store. And it was incredible. Yeah. And the friggin' hail was about the size of a pea.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least.
Well, nothing like poor Texas and what they got on July 4th.
Oh,
I feel so sorry for those people.
horrible.
Keep Texas in your prayers, everybody. It's a really bad situation if you haven't watched the news. The flooding, the water came up from the Guadalupe River and the Contra River and everything else. So fast, it rose like almost 30 feet in half hour, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
I think it was about 25 minutes. And there's still people missing from there.
Yeah, a lot of people are missing and a lot of people died, and it's just a terrible thing. So keep people in their prayers. But today we are talking about Dillon, Montana. And if you've never been to Dillon, it is one of my favorite towns. It's I go up to Butte every year, and it's one of those, unfortunately, I would like to go there and actually spend more time there because it's a drive-through spot for me, right? You go, you fuel up, maybe go have something to eat, but it's a really neat little town. So it's about an hour and a half, hour and 15 to Butte from Dillon. So it was a pretty neat little history on the town. It was basically created September 13th. 1880. That was like its founding day.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't a town then, but basically some guys got together and they bought a really large ranch. I guess by Texas standards, it's not that large. It was less than 500 acres, but it's a nice sized ranch, and they bought it to work there. And the town kind of grew up around it basically because of Sidney Dillon. He was a guy connected with the railroad. And they brought the railroad in, and they ended it right there. And its original name was called Terminus, which I didn't know because it was the terminal end of the railroad. So the railroad only went up as far as Dillon at that point to service the gold mining and silver mining industries that were there. There were tons of little mines that dotted the mountains around Dillon, and they needed supplies. Timbers to be brought in for the adits. They needed all of their supplies for the camps, and that's where they brought them into, was Dillon. And from there, the town grew. So I think it was, the Utah and the Northern Railroad was the railroad company that came in through there. It sits on the Beaverhead River, which is a place that I've been wanting to fly fish for quite a while. It's really pretty through there. Really pretty. It's about the same elevation as we are. It's 5,100 feet in elevation. And Like I said, it became kind of a hub for transportation. So since it was the terminal into the railroad at that point, Bannock, the ghost town of Bannock now, which was not a ghost town then, right? Active community. And Virginia City, which was a large Virginia City, Montana, not Nevada.
Okay.
It was a large hub for supplies for those two areas. So everybody brought their horse and buggies down to Dillon, loaded up all their supplies, and went back. So, and it kind of battled with Bannock. And so just Bannock is Bannack. Bannock County in Idaho is Bannock. I don't know if it have the same meaning. Bannock County, Idaho was named after the Bannock Indians, but I don't know. So if there was a weird spelling issue that happened back in the day, probably doesn't matter.
Oh.
I always found it interesting.
Right. Yeah.
But it also became, I was going to say, so Dillon and Bannock, the town, were battling back and forth between who was going to become the county seat for Beaverhead County, which is the county, and Dillon won, probably because more industry was there. It was easier to build the town. And it became a really important sheep growing area for Montana. And at one time, Dillon shipped more wool than any other Montana town. So lots of sheep industry in that area. Yeah. So what's really also very cool about Dillon is that it sits right adjacent to 3.35 million acres of the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. Tons of recreation there. Tons of recreation. If you're an outdoor enthusiast, definitely is a place to go. And if I talk to a lot of college kids when I'm there, because I'm just nerdy that way. I'll just walk up and talk to people like, what do you like about Dillon? And the last time I was there, I was asking some of the college kids, I stopped, and some of the local residents if they'd heard about what we're going to talk about. And they're like, no, what are you talking about? And I'd show them a newspaper clipping. So, but they're there because they're outdoor people. They're into hiking and climbing and ATVs and fishing and hunting. It's
wow.
Yeah, it's the life. Yeah. So they also have a really large, there's the University of Montana in Dillon, and there's a lot of geology students there. So
Yeah.
Butte has Montana Tech, which is a really big mining university, amongst other things, but the university that has the mining area district up there, Butte, they produce a ton of really educated miners that come out of there, right? And then down in University of Montana in Dillon, it's a huge geology. So a lot of geologists are made at that university. And so they have geology camps all through the mountains there from May through October.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So those kids really get a really good education down there.
Sounds
And then
like
there
it.
are 11 mountain ranges that surround that town, which I thought was interesting. When you drive through there, you definitely see them. They're big mountains, and you're talking about the Beaverhead, East Pioneers, West Pioneers, Tindoy Lima, red conglomerate, Centennial, Blacktail, Ruby, Snowcrest, and the tobacco roots.
Wow.
And those mountains get cold, really, really cold in the winter. We're talking 30, 40, 50 below. So
Holy
it's
cow.
harsh winter up there.
Yeah.
Montana's
That is
first
some-
normal school. You guys, I never heard of a normal school till I moved here. Did you ever hear one?
Yeah.
Normal.
No. I thought we were normal.
Like
I don't know.
normal?
Normal.
What's
Because
a normal
Albion had the normal school, and that was
Mhm.
what put Albion on the map here in Idaho. Well, in Dillon, they had the Montana's first normal school, and that was a school that made teachers. They taught people how to become teachers. Why they called it a normal school as opposed to I really want to see an abnormal school. Wouldn't that be cool?
I think that's the one I went to. I think the
You know
abnormal
what I'm
schools,
thinking
that's
of?
the
It's like
ones I'll
Monty
graduate.
Python or something, the abnormal school. And all the
That was the,
shenanigans that would go on there.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Ah, so in
What was that young
1979, huh?
in Young Frankenstein when he went to go get the brain?
Yeah,
What did the label say? Abby,
Abby,
Abby who? Abby
Abby
normal.
Normal. The best movie ever.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. Uh, anyway, so in 1979, and we're going to talk about that more, you guys are, but the top population was 3,900 people. It's a small town. It's
Oh
small. The
wow. Yeah.
university is stunning. And I'm going to show you guys like where this place is on Google Maps. Okay. So how do I get rid of that? Okay. So, and they have a Patagonia outlet, which is big for outdoor
Really?
adventurers, right? So we're scrolling out from Dillon. There's Bannock Ghost Town. Been to Elkhorn Hot Springs. It's really, really cool. But these mountains here are something. You keep scrolling out. Now you're down into Idaho, and here's Yellowstone right here.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
have just, yeah, the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness is absolutely incredible. But Dillon is like smack dab in the middle of all of this. I was going to show you. Butte is right there, right here. Dillon itself is pretty small as you come in here. I mean, it's a small town. And back in 79,
Oh,
it's a lot smaller than it is right now.
Yeah.
Oh heck yeah.
Okay.
So
So
which kind of brings me into what we're talking about today. When you have a town of 3,900 people, or it's irrelevant, you have those little towns, everybody knows everybody in those little towns. And they all talk back and forth, and they're all family one way or the other. But unfortunately, the topic that we're talking about today is kind of it's rough. 1979, there was a jet crash in Dillon, and unfortunately, it was the Montana Air National Guard pilot was killed Monday when his fighter, it was a F-106 fighter, crashed, and he was going over the Dillon's parade, the Labor Day parade. So 3,600 people, or whatever the census was back then, everybody was there. Everybody was there. And unfortunately, there were some things that we'll talk about a little bit later. But as these two F-106s were doing flybys, and they had already done their pre-flight, and they had already done everything, and unfortunately, Captain Joel Road, he was flying at the wing of his partner, and he actually hit a grain elevator, and it was a low speed accident. They were not flying fast because they were only like 400 feet off the deck. And these folks that were watching, I mean, that must have been exhilarating to see a jet that close, because usually we don't see stuff like that. So they were at low speed, low range, and once they apparently, before this all happened, that grain silo had come down and they'd rebuilt it, and they rebuilt it taller, and I think it was like 40 feet taller than when it was, and that did not show up on their research when they did their pre-flight. And unfortunately, when they came through, they actually hit the grain silo, and he tried to fight it, and it ended up coming down in a ball of fire in the middle of this parade that everybody's there. The pilot ended up passing.
yeah.
He and again, the bad thing about it was, when you're in one of these little small towns, everybody. So I think the final count was 1 dead and 8 people were very seriously hurt. And then there were some lower casualties. Nothing that killed people. Unfortunately, like I said, it was the 70s. They worked with a very small contingent of fire back then. They responded to a memorial hospital that was there in town, and the hospital was overwhelmed because they did not have the background for taking care of that kind of stuff. And it's unfortunate. The crash happened at 11:15 a.m. while the jets were making their general low-level pass at tip to tip, and all of the wings over the parade route. Witnesses said that they were about, I take that back, they were about 180 feet off the deck.
Yeah.
So,
which is about 800 feet too low, according to NATOPS, which is your manuals for the military, right? It's that's your Bible for aircraft in the military, and as an air traffic controller, we also had to understand NATOPS, some portions of it. And you're not supposed to do a flyover any less than 1,000 feet with military aircraft.
well, and I'm sure that I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to give everybody a show, right? And that's exactly what they wanted to do. And they did give a show, unfortunately, at 180 feet. Excuse me. There were pieces of the plane skidded over buildings, into buildings, crashing an Exxon station, and they went up to 5 blocks away. So I can imagine not only this plane coming in contact with the silo, the devastation of just the carnage of stuff that just happened. And it's unfortunate because you're out there for a good time.
Yeah.
And you've got your family out there, and you're making a day of it. And I'm from a very small town, so if I don't know you, I know a guy that knows you,
right?
And when you come to that kind of stuff, it's horrible, it's horrendous. And
I wanted to sorry, but I wanted to say something about this picture real quick.
Yeah.
So okay, the wings came off this thing when it hit.
Yeah.
Right. The fuselage, which is the primary, the piece that the pilot is sitting in with the cockpit, and then all of the rest of this plane, basically shot like a cannon down the street, on fire.
Wow.
So you've got this thing like a missile going down the street. Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah, definitely. And so they said that the pilot, Captain Rod Rood, his name was Captain Joel Rood. He was 32 years old. He was from Great Falls, and he ejected after striking the elevator and landed near the railroad tracks. Yeah. And unfortunately, and that has to do with, there's a certain level, like you just said, that that the safe level when they can eject, right? And clearly 180 feet is too low. And I'm sure, that was just his reflex from his training and everything.
It kicks in.
Yeah. But I can't even imagine.
If it hit that elevator too, it tipped it. So when he ejected, he's not going up.
Yeah.
He's probably almost parallel with the plane and ejecting sideways, going down through everything. Yeah.
And it's, you think about stuff like that. The other day we were at the parade here, and there was I'm going to say I know it wasn't a B-2.
The aircraft that's over at the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'll look it up. It's a
But
beautiful
anyway,
bird.
going back, that airplane was probably, I'm going to say, 1,000 feet. I didn't know that that was their low level flight for stuff like that. And you never think that this kind of stuff is going to happen,
It's
right?
a
And that's
B-25.
unfortunately, was
There
it a
you go. Yeah.
B-25? Yeah. And they, God, it was so cool looking. It was just so cool
Yeah.
looking. So I can imagine you're sitting here checking out the parade, and the baseball team that little Johnny played on, they took first place and they're in the back of a truck or whatever. And then, holy cow, here comes this flyby, and everybody's checking that out, and things just go bad.
Yeah.
And things go bad in a bad way.
Um,
You know?
I do have some pictures to share of the actual incident, and I found these online, and I did not see any copyright with them. So I don't know who took the photos, because we would certainly give credit to whoever took
Yeah.
these photos. I'm assuming they were parade goers with an Instamatic camera, got the shot of a lifetime, and
Definitely.
unfortunately, but this was the two jets coming over Main Street. Look how low they
Oh,
are.
wow.
That's
Golly.
perspective right there.
Definitely.
They're tip to tip here, right? You've got one lower than the other. The other thing that you won't see on this image that was pretty interesting from the onlookers who were there and witnessed this crash was that they were sitting tail low. They were coming in tail low. And
Oh,
so they're not level. They weren't level in flight. They were tail low, which is a lot of drag on the aircraft. I found that pretty interesting. I don't know why they would have done that. And then another image that I found, again, no copyright on this one that I can find. This one, you can see it in an angle. Somebody's snapping away, and look, this is when they.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
wow.
God. That's
That
incredible. Can
is,
you imagine? That's $1 million picture right there.
yeah, and I've seen a picture similar to this from somebody else that was copyrighted. This one's done at a tilt because you can tell he was probably snapping away, or she
Oh yeah.
snapping away as he went by, hoping to
Oh,
get a picture.
yeah.
And it's all cockeyed and crazy, and then from there everybody's screaming and running and panicking. And
Oof.
yeah, absolutely bonkers photo of what happened there. And they hit the top of that elevator. The elevators that I showed, and I'll show them again here, have been rebuilt. That's what they look like now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they were much taller. It was much taller building before.
Yeah. Well, if you figure you see they're 180 feet off the deck, and it looks like looks like, just from my perspective, that those elevators are about 200 foot.
It's hard to tell, right? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The story of a building is what, roughly 10 feet?
Ish. Yeah. So
Ish.
here's
So
10 to 12 feet for
per story.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
So, and then you're looking at those right there are probably, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a 70 footer, because you figure
Oh, the sheets you're counting.
the way the sheets are, those are 10-foot sheets. And I'm just, again,
Yep.
um, just from what my third grade education, we used to build retention tanks, and usually when they brought them in, they were in 10-foot sections.
Let's
So
go back
if
and look
you,
at this picture again.
so it looks like,
See,
and this is, he
different structure.
didn't miss. I mean, he didn't hit it by much. And if he would have been able to roll to the right, he probably would have missed it. But then again, that goes back to your pre-flight.
Yeah.
You've got to know your highs and lows, and I don't know a lot about being a pilot. That's your expertise. But I would imagine, it was the 70s.
Well,
You
we still
still,
have just a little background on flying, not to interrupt Mad Max, but just to show people. So there's charts, there's aviation charts that have the height of different objects, like your wind turbines out here, towers that have the red lights. They have the red lights for flight, and they have on your charts are published and usually updated like every 6 weeks, or some of them 12 weeks. I mean, we were constantly throwing away aviation charts because the FAA is updating them constantly, and they get their actual hard copy, and now you can get them electronically too, right, if you're flying. And so the elevator, it was probably listed at, you said it was rebuilt higher, right?
It looked like it was rebuilt lower. If they're 180 foot off the deck, those grain elevators that you showed.
Not after the crash, but
okay.
Before the crash, there was some component that made them taller than that was probably published.
Right, and that might be that apparatus right there.
Yeah.
So like I said, if they're 180 feet off the deck on their flyby, and you were talking just a little bit ago about their tail drag, and that was probably part of the show. They wanted everybody to see. I mean, think about it, how cool does that look, right?
Right.
But when they came through, maybe they didn't have updated maps. I mean, again, I hate to revert back to it, but in the 70s, we were not as technical as we are now.
That's true.
So if you're working off, could have been working off old paper.
Flying that's critical, and certainly these guys were on top of it. But just to let you guys know, there's another component, and it happens more frequently than people realize. But there's an altimeter in an aircraft. You set your altimeter based on the local control tower will give you your altimeter setting for the day, what it is reading, and what that altimeter is showing you air pressure, right? So it fluctuates constantly throughout the day. So every hour in the control tower, we updated our weather and gave current altimeter, and that comes from the National Weather Service. Gives you all this information. We would do an hourly update or as needed throughout the hour. If conditions are changing because of thunderstorms and things are moving rapidly in the weather department, then you're just on it. You're recording constantly. You start with alpha at midnight, and then you go through. You could have Zulu. You could have like the whole alphabet repeated again, and it's on a loop. It's recorded. So you key up, the local control tower is giving you altimeter. Well, if you don't adjust your altimeter, you're flying either too high or too low based on density of air. So if you're flying too low, if your altimeter, if you didn't set it correctly, or maybe they set it up in Great Falls where they were stationed and they came down to Dillon and the altimeter changed, like the air pressure changed, then they're flying lower than what they're reading in their cockpit. There's a lot of variables. I really doubt that this was probably the issue. I think it was showmanship. I don't know. Just saying.
Well, and you always, so you always look at, and that was a fighter pilot, whether he was a reserve fighter pilot, what, it's irrelevant. That person that was piloting that airplane, that was a professional fighter pilot. That person, might have been flexing a little bit, like you said, a little bit of showmanship, and look how cool we are. But I always look at stuff like, well, okay, so you're a professional. You should know what your procedures are. You should know exactly how things work. You should be able to train, to deviate from your training, because we all know that you go on scene for something and you're set up for a 2-vehicle accident, just per se. And come to find out, there's a lot of logistics in that 2-vehicle fender bender. A lot of things happen. I've seen more people get transported on single vehicle accidents. I've seen a lot of people die in a single vehicle accident just because and this accident that you come up on, and there's 4 cars wadded up, and everybody's walking away. So, everything changes. Your scene changes from everything, and I can imagine something like that. That silo was not built, or they had bad information, or a little bit of flexing, a little showing off. Heck yeah, I would. When we were on the fire truck, I waved at everybody, whether I knew you or not. Didn't make a difference.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it is.
I did read, and I don't know, Mud Lover, if you read this in any of your research, but somebody said that the wingtip clipped the elevator. So, however, another onlooker said that the wing actually went about 5 feet into that elevator. He was that low that it took off. It sheared off about 5 feet as he hit it, and then everything
Oh, wow.
happened. Also, right behind this facility was an Exxon bulk fuel storage plant.
Oof.
Right behind here. And had they been filled to capacity, they think it would have leveled the complete town.
I imagine.
It was not
Ugh.
filled to capacity. There was only about 17,000 gallons, but it did catch on fire.
Yeah.
So they
And-
talked about when they evacuated people up to 15 miles away from the central area. Law enforcement, volunteers, fire. They evacuated everybody from that area because of that. Again, one of those logistical things that you've got to think about, as you come on scene, there's a lot of stuff that happens. And so you've got to do your scene size up as you come on, your scene size up, you're given a report. Now I can speak for the 70s after watching a lot of emergency in Squad 51. They did a lot. They did their scene size up. They reported what was going on. And I know for fact, because it was a long time since I fought fire, but we gave scene size up, first engine on board, squad, patrol, didn't make a difference. That was your job to give scene size up. So I can imagine these guys, first responders, they gave their scene size up and they started pushing people out of there. And just the mayhem, you have a lot of folks there that might have been former military, former law enforcement, former fire, whatever. You got a lot of volunteers in these little towns. So you have the people that are trained to help and the people that want to help and the people that are just losing their friggin' minds. So you've got to manage that as well, So from a training aspect, from a training background, you hope that you have these people that are understanding what's going on. And not only that, you have the people that they want to be in there. They want to be in the mix. They want to, and I hate to say it, you have people that take stuff from the scene. There might be a chunk of that friggin' jet in some guy's potato barn. And that's just the way it happens.
Yeah.
I don't know where the full fuel facility is. Now, I did find a local when I was up there in May, and a lot of the pictures of Main Street are the ones I took when I was in May, who said this was the actual incident site. There are silos that are much larger, but I don't know if they were here in the 70s. There.
Right.
But he said no, because this happened on Main Street. He said this was it. This was it. And if you go there, and I'll show you this picture, there's this brick building right here. And part of it almost looks like that probably was the incident site. And see these right here? Doesn't that look like there were tanks?
Could have been, definitely. And you never know.
Both fuel
that could have
storage
went back
area,
to,
because it's gone now.
Which makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because they that might have been their forethought. Okay, look, we're going to stage it here, and then boom, we need to move this. So that facility could be either out of service or moved to someplace else.
Right.
So it looks like it could have been a holding site.
Yeah, I mean, that it looks to me, I mean, you got the railroad right here, obviously. So it's yeah, I don't know, but
Right.
one of the things that in one of the articles that I read said that there were over 80 people hurt from exploding glass.
Right.
When the plane hit, the fireball went up, the fuselage was barreling down the main street, right? And the concussion from then, I think when the fuel tanks went up, that like glass was just blowing out of windows all over the place and in homes and everything else. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
the concussion from the blast. And
Makes
there was
sense.
like 80 people injured from glass flying. It was a terrible thing. And I feel really bad for the captain and his family. I mean, this is just such a tragic event.
Yeah.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about the F-106 because growing up in aviation, I mean, to me, it's kind of a fascinating history about the jet itself. It was named the Delta Dart, but nobody called it that. It was the Six. Everybody called it the
Hmm.
Six. Nobody referred to it by its name because you have like the F-14 Tomcat. You have all of these different names that are given, and everybody knew the Tomcat, but nobody used the name Dart, which I always thought was interesting.
Hmm.
And they said it was kind of a difficult aircraft to pilot. It was a really skilled pilot who flew this one. It was a little bit cumbersome to fly. And it was operational in June 1959, and it was
Oh,
considered
wow.
an all-weather interceptor. Think about Montana. What's in Montana? We have missile silos
Snow.
in Montana all
Yeah,
over
you
the
have a lot
place
of
up
missile
there.
sites. Yep.
Yes, and it's so strategically they needed an interceptor squadron up there in case we had, this is Cold War era, in case we had Russia coming in with bombers to hit our missile silos. So they stationed the F-106 with the Montana Air National Guard, and the six was a interceptor aircraft, and that's what it's. If you go back and look, and let's look at this again. If you go back and look at, where's that one picture I showed? I'm going to try to show it again.
So taking a step backwards as a pilot, um, and being in aviation and then, eventually becoming a pilot on your end, do you have to have a certification to fly a six? Do you have to have a certification to fly a Tomcat? Now I know fixed wing, and rotary wing is you have to have different certifications. But can you just get in a six or a Tomcat or a C-130 and just fly it? I mean, I'm sure you have the rudimentary understanding of how that machine flies, but do you have to have a certification for that specific one?
It's a really good question. I don't really know the answer to that, so I'm not going to make something up. I do know that you have to be qualified for a twin engine. From a single engine to a twin, there's this qualification. Now, a lot of old timers, they didn't believe in that crap anyway. If they could fly it, they flew it. They just got in them and flew. I mean, there's FAA different levels of licenses. So you're either VFR, which is visual flight rules, or instrument flight rules, IFR. IFR is so that you can fly in inclement weather because you're relying on your instrument panel. You're not relying on a visual
Okay.
aspect. You can VFR at night. If it's a clear night, there's VFR conditions, right? So you need to have a certain ceiling height on a cloud, and you have to be able to see a certain distance in front of you. And so you can VFR at night. I didn't know a lot of guys that did that, but private pilots do it all the time. My dad, he just didn't. He flew. He would fly. He flew search and rescue at night, but mostly it's during the day. So they were looking for downed aircraft. So I don't know. I think probably there's another level of, and I don't know how the military handles it. I know that the pilots you're going to fly the F-22. That's your bird. And so I'm sure, a whole level of standards that they qualify for. And then if they want them to fly something else, they're going to have to go right back through training again to fly this other. But yeah, I don't know specifically.
Sure. And that takes me back to Independence Day, right? When they were going to attack, and they had all these guys that were former pilots, and there was actually a statement made. This might not be used to the plane that you're used to flying, but you can fly it anyway.
I think if you're probably somebody who's qualified in one of those types of fighters, you can probably get into anything and handle it.
Sure.
I mean, the rudimentary basics of flight are going to be the same, but you're going to have a whole lot of whiz-bang features in the cockpit you may not know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know what's funny is I had a buddy of mine that worked on the original Top Gun programming. He actually programmed all the instrumentation in there. And in the second Top Gun, in I think it was Maverick or whatever, I don't know. When Tom Cruise, of course, and the other guy find these two Top Gun airplanes that they're flying, if you remember, when they started one, they had to start one and then start the other one off the first one. And there's a friggin' toggle switch. It's a 39 cent. It's a 15-cent metal toggle switch. And I asked my buddy, I said, Wayne, is that the way it was? He goes, oh, that flew everything. If you didn't turn that friggin' 15-cent toggle switch on, that you couldn't start that other plane.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Hey, it's not starting. Did you turn on the toggle switch? And apparently the toggle switch was way down in the bottom somewhere where you could not accidentally touch it mid-flight. It could not be down by your feet. It actually had to be in a secured area because, you're fighting, you're flying, and all of a sudden the friggin' toggle switch turns off. And they can't restart that if they can't restart it from another plane, which is pretty interesting.
Pretty fascinating. I've flown a lot of different planes, and I am not a licensed pilot. I just grew up flying everything with my dad. So it's like, can I land? Yeah. Can I take off? Yeah. Can I get us where we need to go? Yes. Can I do it legally? No. I have to be with somebody with a license. Legally, I could not. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Are there a lot of people that are flying out there without licenses every day, especially ranchers and whatnot? You go out to Texas, they're not herding cattle anymore with horses. They're using helicopters. Yeah. You think those ranchers went out there and got a license for that one-seater helicopter that they're in? You see those guys? They are more ballsy than crop dusters. I've seen those guys going, oh my God, I've watched them fly. Like, I would fly with them.
As the whole bubble's coming this way, and I'm like, holy cats, because I know that machine is not supposed to fly that way.
Oh,
I grew up flying
and these are ranchers.
Ridiculous.
They're like, I got this. Do you think they're licensed? I don't think so. Anywho, it's an interceptor, right? So it was supposed to intercept Russian bombers coming in. So it was a very clean aircraft. When you look at it again, I'll show the picture. It really didn't have a lot of armament outside the body. Most of the arms were kept in the fuselage. It would have doors, everything would drop down and shoot. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of different than when you look at a lot of our aircraft now that are just loaded to the gills with bombs. I mean, in the Navy, occasionally when they're coming in, and a lot of times they're coming in with all of their arms underneath it, they're armed, but they couldn't turn off their arms. So they're coming in hot. And they're like, we had to station like fire trucks and everything else, just in case when they landed, one of them would take off down the runway and catch something on fire, blow something up, because they couldn't. Their signal in the cockpit was that it was armed and dirty and it was ready to go, and they couldn't disarm it. And so sometimes, a lot of times, that's just an electronic issue. They didn't actually leave the aircraft when they were landing, but they could have. So
Maybe
what
they
this
didn't have
was,
that toggle switch.
yeah, that little toggle switch
They
you
didn't
got
have
to
that toggle switch. They put on.
this jet was you talked about when the pilot ejected, and the 6 was designed to go supersonic. It was a really, really fast airplane of its time. You got to remember, it's 1959. On 1959, Major Joseph Rogers set a world speed record of 1,525 miles per hour in the 6. He was at 40,500 feet. And so
Wow.
this guy was flying. I mean, is that fast now? Maybe not, but for the
Right.
time, he was going pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
The armament in this thing was pretty amazing. It was armed with, there were 4 Hughes AIM-4 Falcon air-to-air missiles that it was armed with. And it also had a single 1.5 kiloton atomic warhead in it.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So this
Dang.
thing, it was, when it went up, it meant business, and it was there, and they had to scramble quick. I mean, because we were really, really afraid during the Cold War that Russia was going to come in and start attacking, right? And so we had
Yeah.
these interceptors all over the United States ready to scramble at a moment's notice. And they were loaded to the gills with what they needed to be loaded with to take out a bomber.
They came to party.
Yeah. So a lot of people compared this to the F-4 Phantom, but I think the Phantom outmaneuvered it a little bit. But the 6 was very capable in fighter combat as well, but that's not what it was designed for. But could it do what it needed to do? Yeah. But it was kind of a little bit more cumbersome to fly, I think, from what I've read on it. And one of the problems with it was the ejection seat. And ejection seats are typically designed for not supersonic speeds, because as you hit the button, and we had a really tragic incident with an ejection seat at one of our air shows back when I was in the Navy. And the ejection seat is designed that when that button is hit, the canopy flies off and the seat with the pilot comes out. But if you're going supersonic, there's nothing with enough rockets coming off the bottom of that seat to get you out of the way, the tail and the fuselage fast enough. And so they lost 12 pilots, the first 12 pilots who ejected from the 106 during all of the tests. That's why they're tests, because they're reconfiguring aircraft, and the seats were too slow. And so as the pilot's trying to eject, you couldn't get out of the way of the aircraft, and the fuselage is hitting them, and there's just no way to eject. They figured by the time they got to 1979, they had most of the kinks worked out, because most of the time when a pilot's ejecting, they're going much slower than supersonic. Something's going very wrong, and they're at a slower speed. Okay, so they're not supersonic.
Okay.
And so they figured they had all the kinks worked out. And I don't think, it doesn't sound like, I look back at some of the crash, the incident reports after, when they do an investigation afterwards, it doesn't sound like there was anything wrong with the seat. It sounded like he was just happened to be, when Captain Rude ejected, the canopy was tilted because he hit and it probably brought him this way, and he went parallel with the ground, and his chutes never got to deploy.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I've seen that happen in real life on some of our incidents, that the chutes never got to deploy, and unfortunately the pilots were killed. And
Well, isn't there minimum footage? Isn't there a minimum footage off the deck that when they do eject, that's their safe footage? Because I'm imagining 180 feet. Now, granted, he was kicked to the right, but 180 feet, is that high enough to eject from?
Probably not. I don't know what the minimum footage is. That's a really good question. I don't know what the minimum is for this ejection seat and this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? You've got to have some, the parachute needs to be able to deploy. I mean, that's what's The seat has a parachute on it to bring you down. That's the point. It ejects you and then it floats you down. So the one other feature about the 6 that was pretty interesting that I didn't know until I started researching it was between 1980 and 1986, it was modified for the purpose of lightning strike research. So they would actually send it up to get struck by lightning to see what would happen to avionics when it was struck by lightning.
wow.
And it was known as the lightning strike airplane, and it was struck 714 times without damage.
Oh,
So pretty fascinating. On
Yeah.
1 hour flight at 38,000 feet, one aircraft, one of the 6s, was struck 72 times in an hour.
wow.
And
That's
it
wild.
still could fly. So a lot of people freak out about lightning when you're flying, like on a 747 or
Mhm.
something like that, 737. Aircraft are designed to withstand lightning. Now, can bad things happen? Yes. But they were doing research with the 6 because it was capable of getting so high and flying. And I don't know if it was a fluke that they realized, oh, wow, this aircraft can really take it. Let's go ahead and do what it does and let it get hit. There was another incident with the 6 that was pretty interesting, and this one also happened in Montana, and I'm going to show you a picture of it. But on February 2nd, 1970, there was an interceptor, a 6, that was piloted by Captain Faust, and something went wrong during the flight, and it ended it into a flat spin. And if you guys have seen Top Gun, I think they had a flat spin in there. I've seen a flat spin in person. And so instead of spinning down with the nose, right, they spin like this. And as it's spinning, it's just losing altitude and spinning down to the ground. It's like a drill bit coming down to the ground. When the pilot ejected in the flat spin, the weight of the airplane equalized to the point it landed itself and was able to fly again.
Wow.
That's pretty wild.
I
Dang.
think they called it that particular plane. They called it the cornfield. And again, no credits on this one. I don't know who to give this credit to. There it is in Montana in a cornfield. It was able to. They did some minor repairs to the belly of the fuselage, and it went and flew again. And now it's on display at a museum when they finally retired it. But the
Wow.
captain walked away from the incident, and the plane basically walked away from the incident. And I thought, oh my
That's
God,
crazy.
how amazing is that?
Dang. That's so amazing.
Yeah, so they nicknamed this one the Cornfield Bomber. So, yeah.
That's pretty clever. I was flying back from. I used to fly a lot, and never me personally. It was always commercial. And we were flying out of Florida one time. I was coming back, and the storm was just incredible, and I was very I was scared. I'm going to say it. I was scared. And so the plane goes up and it's just getting beat up. And all of a sudden there was a boom and the plane kind of dumped and they picked it back up and the pilot comes on board and he says, because you all have to speak. Why do you guys do that?
I know that.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain from the flight deck. The boom you just heard was the aircraft was just struck by lightning. And I'm like, but don't worry about it because the aircraft is built for that. And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, I'm glad somebody thought that up, right? I'm glad somebody was like, you know what? This thing might get struck by lightning. Hey, Steve, you want to go ahead and, let's do some research. So it was, you're flying in a storm anyway, and you're just getting beat up. That poor aircraft is flexing. You look out there and the wings are flapping back and forth. And then this guy is he's ladies and gentlemen, I'm really cool and I'm flying this thing.
And they're so cool. Fly. They're like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And then I know on YouTube there's some stuff talks about the control kit and
Yeah.
talking to airplanes back and forth, and they just talk trash back and forth to each other, and it's incredible just to hear these guys. And if it's truly what they're saying, it's these guys. Some of those pilots are jerks.
Oh boy.
But then air
Oh,
traffic
boy.
control, they're chipping back and forth at each other.
Uh-huh.
So
You definitely, in air traffic control, you definitely have your favorite pilots. And then if they tick you off, you just taxi them in place and hold. There may not be anything going on, but you're going to hold them until you're done, because they can't leave the deck. They cannot leave the deck until you give them the okay. And if they made you mad,
Oh my gosh.
hold. And after burning about $3,000 worth of fuel and just say, come back to the tower, are we, can we? And I actually saw one controller say, "Are you going to apologize to our staff?" And they're
really,
Wow.
yes, ma'am. Yes, I'm really sorry about my attitude down there in flight planning. Thank you. You're clear clear for takeoff.
Wow.
have a good day.
Yeah, it's like, don't tick us off, because we're like, it's funny because in air traffic control, you have a lieutenant over everybody, but they're never there. They're always doing whatever they do. We're all enlisted. We were all enlisted in our tower and our radar units and our flight planning. We're all enlisted. Then they'd come in, some of these guys come in all cocky and everything else, and we're like, yeah. So then you call up a radar or tower and say, "Man, Lieutenant so-and-so," they're like, "We got you." And then they and so yeah. So anyway.
See, that kind of stuff is cool. Because I've seen pilots, and they're cocky. They'd come out and they'd land their helicopter and in fire, especially because those guys, they're cool Cat Johnson.
Mhm.
So they come out and they're wanted. And I was always like, look at the pilot. Yeah. And the crew members are like, yeah, look at the pilot.
Yeah, I know.
A lot of those
They're
guys
all
are
cocky and
punks.
everything else.
Yeah, they're punks.
Yeah, some of them certainly are. I would have to say that 98% of the pilots that I dealt with in the Navy were really good.
Yeah,
Really
I
good
imagine.
guys. And
Good.
some of them I showed horses with their wives, or whatever. I mean, we knew each other off. You're not supposed to mingle with officers, but you do. It's a small place, and you end up going
True.
out, and everybody's going to dinner and having a good time. But yeah, I really, getting back to this accident, I really cannot. Wow, I keep thinking about it. So my dad and I would fly. My dad was a little crazy. He was a little bit crazy, man. But he flew up in the era where, you did crazy stuff. He went under,
Yeah.
he took his whole squadron under the Golden Gate Bridge. So many times the
Oh my
FAA
gosh.
threatened to pull his pilot's license from him. So then all they did was tape over their wing numbers, their tail numbers,
Oh geez.
so that they couldn't be reported again. It was like, they did crazy stuff. We'd come down there was a place that we'd flew out of Georgetown, California, and then we'd fly. You getting really, really close to the tops of the pine trees, and then all of a sudden the ground just gives away from you, and it freaks people out. But it's the American River Canyon. And so we knew it's coming up. But if you're not, and you're trying to touch the top of those tail trees with because we flew tail draggers a lot. And so your gear is always down, right? You don't tuck up with the gear. And so, and he'd laugh. We were really realistically a couple 100 feet over the pine trees, but it looks like you're going to hit him. When I go back to this incident and you look at how low these guys were over town. Let me show that picture again, if I can find it.
180 feet off the deck.
Wow, look at how. One thing I can tell you is, in the control tower during the day, we're pretty good with judging altitude. This is insane to me, how low they were. And I know it's showmanship, and I don't want to say anything about the pilot,
No.
you know, because this is such a horrible tragedy. And I don't know, somebody suggested maybe something went wrong with the aircraft. And I'm like, okay, I can see that if one was that low, but the other one was just as low.
Oh,
So Captain
that's
Rood
true.
may have been the lead in that formation, right? Because you're in formation. They were staggered, but the lead guy's always the first guy, right? And so the other guy's following him. He's watching the tip of the wings. He's watching everything, and he's following like the Blue Angels. If you guys have ever watched the Blue Angels and how they fly,
Mhm.
the lead pilot's singing and they're just watching. They're not looking at anything else but tip to tip. They're watching the plane that they're supposed to watch and the tip. So if the lead guy is going to take them into the deck, they're all going to follow him because they're watching the tip.
Right.
Because those guys are inches away from each other, not feet.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy how close they are. Could these guys have been, I don't know. I really, really don't know.
Yeah.
Well, let me go back to that image again. It's hard to say who's in the lead here.
Well, you know, it looks
don't
like
know.
it looks like the plane on the right is
It
just
looks
a
like
little bit
maybe he's in
ahead.
the lead.
And you know,
I think this is
and
the
I
one
get
that
it.
flipped.
These folks were out, they wanted to put on a show.
Yeah.
You know, and they wanted these people to see how cool their plane was. And they went, and I get it. I'd have been right there. You know, hey,
Yeah.
can you hang a rope off that? I'll swing from the
Mhm.
rope. But you know,
You'll
you
never
look
really
at that,
know.
and I understand. That's what they were doing. They wanted to give them a show, and even looking at it like that, they're so. And I wonder if the other plane reacted to
Oh, he
that by.
pulled up.
It looks
I
like
bet he pulled up.
he's trying to pull up, right? And if you look at it at that angle, he
Yeah.
looks like he's a little bit higher.
Oh, it's just so sad. And
Yeah,
it's so
definitely.
sad for everybody involved because you're there with your children, you're there to have a good time. It's Labor Day, it's the end of the summer. It's the
Sure.
crop harvests are coming in. They are having their rodeo. They have music going on. It's the big deal. It's a huge deal. They did have 4 different county fire departments come in and battle the fire because the fuel tanks, I think, were going up. And then the Forest Service came in. They said the Forest Service, I know there's a BLM office up there as well, but the Forest Service came in with helicopters and they were throwing borate on it as fast as they could. The whole thing is just, and it's such a neat little town. If you go back and look at Main Street, it's when I was up there in May, I mean, this whole Main Street is little restaurants and coffee shops, and people are out mingling and doing what you do in small towns I was there on a Sunday, so it was probably right after church let out, and everybody's, you know what I mean? There's a park over here. There's a rail, or I'm saying over here like you can see my cursor. There's a park. There's a railroad. There's like a little museum there. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and it was really quite busy, I thought, for a Sunday, because usually these towns are really sleepy on Sundays. A lot of people out and about, and so all 3,900 people were probably out there to watch that parade because there's really not much else to do.
Heck yeah.
You know, and like I said, coming from a small town, you know everybody there.
Yeah.
You know, and it's family, it's friends, it's you know, after the parade, these guys were going to go play ball somewhere, you know, and that's, you know, and somebody was going to go home, and we're going to barbecue, we're going to have whatever. It's Sunday afternoon, so there's Sunday meal going on, everybody's going. And then it was just bad. It just bad.
Yeah. I do want to, to end the show, we'll just, Captain Rood, they spelled it R-U-D-E here, and I've seen it spelled R-U-D-D, so I'm not sure the spelling. He was with the Montana Air National Guard, and they were the Flight Interceptor Group. And he lived in Great Falls. I want to honor Captain
Yeah.
Rude. He was trying to, their heart is always in everything that they do. I'm sure his family, what a loss. I can't even imagine. And I'm very sorry to his family, to the people hurt in the incident. I hope that it's pretty interesting for something so traumatic to have happened. And just about everybody I've stopped and talked to in Dillon in May, most of them have never heard about this incident. There was one person.
Wow.
How easily we are able to put, and that's human psyche, right? You don't want to keep bringing up terrible things.
Yeah.
But this plaque is there to dedicate memory to Captain Rude, and yeah. I also read about one gentleman. It was in an article in some paper somewhere, and he said he'd actually forgotten about the parade, and he was driving down Main Street during the parade to go get his mail.
Oh my
When
gosh.
the aircraft, I don't know how he got through, because usually they barricade stuff, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he was right in front of the silos when the plane hit it, and his vehicle was in the fireball, and he just kept driving forward and drove out of it.
Oh my.
Fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah.
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 So the captain was the only fatality. It could have been so much worse.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you had not heard about the story of Dillon, Montana, and the six, I thought this was an interesting one to bring to you. And we will be back bringing you yet another crazy story at another time. And thank you all for hanging out with us. We enjoy each show that we do.
Yes. Yes. Thanks for
Have a
watching.
great summer.